Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 570 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our sixth book just came out. It's called I'm So Beautiful, It's Ridiculous: Unleashing and Promoting Strength, Self-Worth, and Real Sisterhood. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, it's time to start working on recruitment. Yes, I know we just wrapped up finals in the spring semester. However, the summer is the best time to connect with those rising sophomores and juniors, to engage them in daily activities while they're not bogged down with all the schoolwork. I want you to start forming real one-on-one relationships that are going to bring new leaders into your organization this fall, and you don't have to spend any money whatsoever doing it. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about your members who are unique and how to turn that into recruiting power. Michael Dixon received a bachelor's degree in multidisciplinary studies from North Carolina State University, as well as a master's degree in college student affairs leadership from Grand Valley State University. Michael is also a doctoral candidate at Indiana State University. He is a former higher education administrator with more than 18 years in the industry. He has several research interests, and his brief study in philosophy causes him to ask lots of questions, which is what I like the best. In his free time, you can catch Michael playing a round of disc golf or competing in sports and or board games. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, thanks, Mike, for having me on.
It is an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, you decided on NC State University for your undergraduate experience. So why did you decide on NC State?
I did, and I'll try to keep this really, really brief. So I grew up in a really smaller town in Eastern North Carolina, about 22,000 people, only one middle school, one high school. And turns out that a lot of my peers wanted to go to some of the other institutions that are also in the Triangle area that have some blue attached to them. I didn't want to be where they were. I wanted to do my own thing. And I originally was studying to be a high school statistics teacher. So math education and statistics. And I looked to see which organizations, which schools had statistics as a major. That could be a double with education. And there were two, North Carolina A&T, which is in Greensboro, and NC State, which is in Raleigh. And given that I didn't want to be too far away from home, 3 hours versus 2 hours, I thought NC State would be a great choice. And so I only applied to one school, that was NC State. I had a scholarship to go to NC State to major in education, and was able to take that. So that's what started my degree. And I learned a lot being at NC State, given some of the circumstances that we're not going to go into too much detail here about. But yeah, so NC State.
It obviously worked out very well for you. And I also only applied to one school. Students today, they're like my daughter, she applied to like 25 schools. And I'm like, what? 25 schools? I'm like, I didn't have time to fill out that many applications. But anyway, that's another difference between our generation and the new generation, I guess. So I see that you're ice cold over there. I see Alpha Phi Alpha in the background. So you joined in a grad chapter. What made you choose that route?
Oh, yes. All right. So while I was at NC State, interestingly enough, I wanted to do a lot of different things. I was first generation American and first generation college student. So when I got to NC State, coming from the small town that I was in, I mean, it was close to 25,000 at that time. The world was the oyster. You saw anything and everything that you could possibly get involved in. I started in my residence hall. I got involved in Residence Hall Association, which then led me to wanting to be involved with residence life. Wasn't able to do that. Orientation, I saw that you could become an orientation assistant. I got familiar with the Greek life scene because I was an intramural supervisor. One of the former supervisors came up to me one day. I was sitting in my residence hall room and just doing something, and he knocked on my door and said, "Hey, the place I had to quit my job. Do you want a job?" I was like, "Sure. What do you do?" I work for recreational sports. Okay, cool. So went interviewed, got the job as an intramural supervisor, which at that point you were supposed to be an official, and then transitioned to supervising, and then got into supervising, and then realized that they're the biggest faction or team sports there was the fraternity and sorority life. And got really familiar with the fact that, IFC, Panhel, MPHC, a smaller collaborative Greek council, multicultural Greeks that didn't fit in the other three. So I really got familiar with a lot of the different individual chapters that were available at NC State. And I learned more about Alpha and the men that were sort of leading the way. They were doing the things on campus. They were the student body presidents. They were the leaders of the organizations. I mean, it was just like, oh, I see myself sort of naturally gravitating towards that group versus the other groups. And so did my initial process, wasn't able to be successful based on my grades and not being able to maintain that. And so I always kept that in the back of my mind and realized that if I was in a position to do it later on in life, then I had the opportunity to do that, not at my first job, but my second job in the Quad Cities, Illinois, Iowa. There's a alumni chapter there and was able to join at that point.
I love it. I love that you joined the grad chapter there. And I wish that was something that was a little bit more commonplace in IFC and Panhellenic. I feel like it's just something that, we do as an undergrad, and it's not really something that we think about in our grad years. But I mean, let's think about this, right? I mean, your grad years are much longer than your college experience. So it is much nicer, I think, to be affiliated with an organization and have a wonderful experience as an alumnus. Why not? I've done a ton of alumni initiations in my IFC organization, just recognizing people that have done a lot of work for the fraternity and sorority community, and maybe they didn't have the opportunity to join a fraternity or sorority as an undergrad. It happens, just like it happened with you. It doesn't mean that we should exclude people. No, we should be bringing people in to be a part of that experience. Why not share that? I think this is that one unique gift that is meant to be shared. And I'm just really grateful that you had that opportunity to become an alpha in a grad chapter. I think that's fantastic. And later on, you worked as chief diversity officer at Manchester University, chief inclusion and diversity officer at Susquehanna University, and now you're continuing that work in an independent K through 8 school for the gifted and talented in a Chicagoland suburb. So I'm wondering what drew you into working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in those college spaces?
Yeah, great transition. So, originally I said I was studying to be education and statistics.
Uh-huh.
About 3 years into that program, realized that we were not made for each other. The classes I took, I was barely getting by. I mean, C's get degrees, as they say. C or C minuses get degrees. And so I was like, I'm not passionate about this. And actually, truth be told, I was academically suspended from the institution and had to do some soul searching that summer. This was the summer after my junior year. I had to do some soul searching, took some classes, was able to be reinstated, did a search in the program book to like figure out something else that I can finish in a relatively short amount of time. And that's where I found my love for philosophy. Multidisciplinary studies was a thing. You could create your own degree. So I actually created my own degree in philosophy and sort of like critical race studies. I mentioned earlier that I was a first generation American. Both my parents are not from the US. Dad's from Jamaica, mother's from the Philippines. Really wanted to understand my role and my understanding of race, but being a biracial male, but also appearing Black, and people treated me as Black. And so I wanted to study that as an undergraduate. So in doing that, realized education was not for me. I didn't want to do engineering, business, law, medicine, because I don't like needles. It's like, what else could I be doing? And someone said, you could work in student affairs. I was like, all right, so what's that? It's like, oh, well, this is, the things that are outside of the classroom at the college level. Okay, what degree do you need? You don't need a particular undergraduate degree, you just need to go to grad school. And so I went to grad school with the understanding that I was going to be working at a college or university for the rest of my life. And I did that for 18 years. What's interesting is that in that time, while I was working in higher education, I realized that what has sort of found my way in my job descriptions are things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Hmm.
So my first job out of grad school was admissions counselor and coordinator of multicultural recruitment. This was at Knox College. And then my next job was coordinator of intercultural life and leadership programs. So I was in student activities, but I had to create essentially a brand from scratch in intercultural life. Then I went to Manchester, then Susquehanna. So everything up to that point, or since 2007, has all had a thread of DEI related to it. And so it just felt natural for me to sort of continue that work, even if I wasn't working in higher ed.
Hmm.
Here we are.
Fascinating. I love the journey. I think it's awesome. And I also think it's really interesting too, just thinking about like, external appearances and what people assume about you. My parents are also from another country as well. I have a passport from another country, so like people make all kinds of assumptions about, the way that you look, the way that you speak, etc. And that may or may not be accurate. So I think that whole, conversation, we can go down a rabbit hole. I think there's so much there. Speaking of DEI, I don't think I'm saying anything out of school by saying that the DEI work has come under fire in this current administration. In your opinion, why is the DEI work so critical?
To me, DEI work is so critical because when you think about the ways in which people think about justice and fairness, diversity, equity, and inclusion principles are all sort of embedded in that. We don't come into situations thinking like, well, I should have access to this and you shouldn't. We all should have access to it. Okay, well, if you think about that, then I mean, we're talking about inclusion and we're talking about on some level equity. If I need something at a certain level and you need something at a lower level, then you should be able to get what you need in order to succeed. And I should be able to get what I need in order to succeed at the levels in which we need them. I shouldn't have to get the X amount and you get X amount knowing that you need more and I need less, because then I will be able to succeed and you can't succeed because you need more. That to me is the difference between equality and equity. And so when we think about sort of how does that then apply to, let's say, business or education or law or any of the fields that you are out there, you think to yourself, yeah, that obviously makes sense. We need to be able to get what we need in order to be successful. Well, we're talking about equity. Well, we need to be able to make sure that people feel like they are part of whatever the organization is, because that's part of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you think about sort of the need of belonging, like that's all it's part of us. So if we're not thinking about some of these situations or the institutions and the ways in which we do business, we're not thinking about it from those lenses, then we're not going to be as successful as we can be. So it's just really unfortunate that this the administration or the ways in which the world is looking at some of these things are thinking like these are just negative things. Like it's not really negative. We really want these things, and if you were to talk about them without using those words, many people would agree to those sentiments. It's just now you use those words and now say, oh well, no, that means this and this is bad, so we can't do that.
Yeah. Listen, I appreciate that lens. I think it's important to talk about, especially now. And I love that you bring up Abraham Maslow. I think I bring him up in Maslow's hierarchy every time I'm talking to fraternity and sorority students, because that belongingness, that is ultimately what fraternity and sorority delivers. Each of us, no matter who we are, where we come from, we are all wired to belong. That's what we want. That is what we seek. And for many of us, that's why we joined a fraternity or sorority. That is the pull. And so when you talk about belonging, that's not controversial. There's nothing controversial about it. It's just who we are. That's how you and I are wired.
Right.
So like, it's amazing to me how we go off on all of these political tangents when we start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But you and I can talk about belonging all day, and there's nothing controversial about it.
Nope.
It's amazing to me. Absolutely amazing. So you have a program, it's called From Quirky to Captivating, turning unique interests into recruiting power. I love this program because I feel like our chapters have very diverse members. And when I say diverse, I'm not just talking about race, okay? I'm talking about religion. I'm talking about country of origin. I'm talking about physical disability. I'm talking about sexual orientation. There's a lot of different ways to talk about diversity. Also, I think that we have a lot of members in our fraternities and sororities that don't fit the traditional mold of a fraternity or sorority member. I think that there are people in our chapters, it wasn't me, by the way, as an undergrad, but there are people in our chapters who have a 4.0, in an engineering program or a pre-med program. That's not typically what you think of when you think of sorority woman. But I'll tell you, there are many women that fit that in our chapters today. So, how do we take these unique interests or unique backgrounds of our members and then turn that into recruiting power?
Sure. So, I've been really thinking about sort of now that I've been out of school for many, many years, even though I am pursuing a, doctorate. Um, I think about my time in undergrad and thinking about what organizations sort of represent. And it's like organizations are like microcosms of businesses, of companies, and each company has its own reputation. And in that reputation, it's sort of like how many degrees of freedom, if you want to take statistics language, how many degrees of freedom do you fall within whatever that reputation is of said organization? And if you fall sort of outside the recommended degrees of freedom, then people look at you and they say, oh yeah, that person's a part of the organization, but really our bread and butter is X. If my organization is there, and we've gotten the people who are really involved in sports and the campus leaders, and we have a person who really doesn't do either one of those things, but really is focused on high achieving in school. And then you say to yourself, well, they're sort of the outlier of this. Well, why couldn't they just be sort of a part of the larger ethos of the organization? We say, we have members who reflect this, the members who reflect this, who reflect this. And when it comes to recruiting, now when it comes to talking with potential members, you don't have to be this in order to join our organization. Yes, we have members who reflect those identities, but we also have members who reflect these other identities who you might be able to, form a relationship with. And really, at the end of the day, we join organizations because of the people, not necessarily because of the organization itself. Now, the organization itself, for some folks, they're like, well, this is what it can provide for me: lifelong membership, connections in the business world, etc. But when we are at particular school, like individuals recruit other individuals to join. And so I have a relationship with you, Mike. And so I'm going to join the organization because I like Mike, and Mike is with Sigma Pi. And so now I'll become a Sigma Pi member. But if Mike was a part of another organization at another school, and I like Mike, then I might join whatever organization he's a part of at whatever that school is. And
Mhm.
so people just have to understand, I need to be able to see some connection with the members. And then in the connection with the members, then I get connected with the larger body of the organization, which then hopefully, reflects the same value sets that I hold.
Man, that's a great point. I really like that. I like the way that you're framing this up because I could see you having that conversation with fraternity and sorority members. I'm talking about thousands, and have them think about why they joined their organization. The reason why they joined their organization is not because of the big social event or the big party or whatever. That's not why they joined. Every single one of us, we all joined because of a person. There's somebody in our life that we wanted to be hanging out with more, and they happen to be part of this organization that we joined. And you're absolutely right. Yes, I joined Sigma Pi fraternity, and I have other people that followed behind me that I recruited into the organization. They joined Sigma Pi because of me. because I was the one who recruited them, because I was friends with them, some of them even before I joined Sigma Pi. I
Right.
knew one kid from high school, and he came to my campus, basically a year after I did, and he joined Sigma Pi. Why did he join? Because we were buddies in high school. It's not any more complicated than that. Okay. And so if I was a member of, I don't know, fill in the fraternity, Kappa Sigma, would he have joined Kappa Sigma? Yes. Yes, he would have. So I think it's just a really fascinating discussion. People join people, right? As we say in the business. And that's really what starts all of it. So just fascinating discussions. So many different routes we can go from here. Now, if we're talking to new members or potential new members, a lot of, especially, men, women too, we get up in our heads about how complicated that is, and we are sometimes struggle to talk to new members in terms of our self-confidence. What advice do you have for students that are struggling with their self-confidence when speaking to potential new members?
Yeah. So like I was thinking about this topic as well because as people do job searches, they start to think like, where are my skill sets and where do they lie? Like some people are really gifted at the gift of gab. They can really talk to anybody. It's sort of like, oh, I know that that person can sell water to a well. That sort of mantra. And there are other people who say, I'm not really good at being in the front. I'm really good at supporting individuals that are doing that sort of work. So people need to take stock and inventory of what it is that they are passionate about, where their skill sets lie. Individuals who struggle with that self confidence, however, need to think to themselves, all right, what is it that I bring to the table that is uniquely me, that I feel comfortable talking about on some level. And as I'm approaching a new conversation with somebody, I'm going to see if I can figure out how to appropriately introduce whatever that is, if that comes up in the conversation. It could be a direct question like, hey, are you interested? Like, Mike, have you ever played disc golf before? Are you familiar with disc golf?
Yep. Hmm.
And you might say, yeah, I am familiar with disc golf. I would love to play one day. Oh, well, great. That's something that I'm passionate about. I'm a member of the Professional Disc Golf Association. I participate in tournaments on a fairly regular basis. I know, there are places that we could play that are either on the campus or around in the area. Love to, take you out sometime to go, test out disc golf. If that's not a thing for you, then you have to say to yourself, all right, well, I attempted to sort of integrate a passion of mine. Let's turn it around. What are you passionate about? Maybe they express something that you might be interested in the future, like, oh, I do podcasts. Well, I'd love to get into podcasting. I really don't know like the first idea or the first thing thinking about when it comes to podcasting. Well, then now you have a chance to sort of express your ways of doing things, and in turn, like you're showing interest in what that person is interested in. They're showing the fact that they can teach, and now you're building a relationship based on mutual interest. Like, I wanted to do that, I have no knowledge of it, you clearly have knowledge of it, let's start there. And then in starting in that, then you start to branch off into other things. I'm having a conversation with you about this. I didn't know that your family is from a different place. Maybe we could talk about that at a future conversation. So I think that people just have to realize you don't have to hit it out the park when you first meet somebody or when you're struggling with self-confidence. You just have to start with something, some commonality. And then as you start to talk with that person, you realize, oh, this is something I can see us sort of branching out and elevating, at a future point. Cool. And then I come back to that conversation. We start there, maybe then branch off to something else. And I think as slowly over time, you start to realize, oh, I'm building confidence because I can talk with anybody because I know the skills that I need in order to be successful, even from an initial conversation.
Yeah, you're trying to find those commonalities, right? And so maybe, it's having a conversation about identities, going back to some of those prior conversations that we've had. And when I think about my own identities, I think about it in a lot of different ways. I'm a father, so I have two kids who are in college right now. I'm a husband, so I got a smoking hot wife at home who keeps me honest. I'm a New Yorker. So I think about myself really embracing the New York mentality, everything about it. That's what I feel in my core, even though I live in Nashville, Tennessee now, I still think of myself as a New Yorker. Like I still act like a New Yorker. That's just in my DNA. It's really hard to get the New Yorker out of a person.
Yeah.
I'm Israeli and I'm Jewish, right? So Israel, to answer your question, that's where my parents are from, right? So being Israeli, and that has a whole subset, right? So they think of Israelis as having a tough exterior and a very soft interior. There's a fruit that people identify with that has that rough exterior. And so that's what they think of when they think about Israelis, that they're a little bit rough on the outside, but once you get to know them, they're as sweet as can be on the inside.
Mm.
So when you start talking about all these identities, that's when we start hooking in. And then we both suddenly, Michael and I are like, oh, both of our families are from other countries. What's that like? And so now we're starting to talk about that and that experience. And we found a place where we can meet and we have that commonality. And I think that will help you when talking to potential new members. So hopefully that discussion is helpful for everybody who is listening. You have another really interesting program. It's called Sourcing and Recruiting, different words, same mission. And in there, you're talking about reducing bias in recruitment. What are some of the common biases that you see in Greek recruitment, and how can chapters start to break them down?
So, when it comes to recruitment, I mean, I think about back to my own experience, and it was so interesting when, I mentioned earlier that I was an intramural supervisor, and at that point, like I knew about Greek life, I knew I wanted to join an organization. I just wasn't sure which one I wanted to join, and I got to know many of the IFC members through the fraternity football league. I think it was flag football at that point in time, and then basketball, and then soccer. So I was just constantly interacting with members. And then, at one point I got invited to some of the rush events. And I remember hearing from this particular organization, if you get invited to 2 rush events, you're probably going to get a bid to the organization. I said, okay, I'll take you up on it. I really liked, to our point that we made earlier, I really liked the guys that I was interacting with.
Mhm.
I thought, oh, did we fit like this? No, but we were definitely like this, and I could see myself sort of developing that relationship as we move forward. Well, I attended 4 rush events, but I quickly realized after the first or second rush event that I did not dress, I did not talk, and I did not have a background that was similar to the other members of the organization. As a matter of fact, when I was in the fraternity house participating in their rush events, I saw the composites on the wall and realized that in looking at the composites on the wall, out of like, I don't know, it was a lot of composites on the wall.
Mm.
And maybe the last 10 years at that point in time, there was only one person, visibly person of color on the wall. I didn't want to think that I didn't have a chance. I mean, clearly there was a person there. That person, the person of color, um, visibly had some resources, drove a X5. Oh, no, it was the M3.
Mm.
It was a BMW, regardless of what it was.
Right.
And had some resources. I did not. I grew up in a single parent household. I was on the Pell Grant. I mean, there was just a number of ways that I was just different from these. I ended up attending 4 rush events, and I did not get a bid to the fraternity. And I often wondered if that bid did not come because of like the way that I looked, my background, whatever. But I really felt like I meshed in well with those individuals. So when I think about sort of like common biases, it's like, do you try to recruit people who are just like you or who share most of the qualities that you share? Or are you really looking for different people to really further the mission of the organization? I think recruitment, and I don't know what recruitment looks like, today in 2025. I know what recruitment looked like in 1999 to 2004. And individuals were really looking for individuals who look like themselves. And if they did stray, I mean, again, to my statistics analysis, I mean, it was like uh, one or two deviations from the mean. It wasn't like we really want to go out of the ordinary and really get somebody who had never thought about Greek life, or I would probably not see myself having a conversation with, moving forward. But I think today people have to understand that we come in all shapes, sizes, interests, whatever. And if they are about the mission of the organization, then we need to be considering their membership, because that's what's going to strengthen us and to be able to either recruit moving forward or to move forward any initiatives that we're trying to happen, on the campus right now.
Yeah, maybe that's where it starts, is having a conversation with the chapter about what is our goal here? Is our goal to recruit more people that look exactly like us, dress exactly like us, and are from the same hometown? Or do we really want to further the mission of our fraternity or sorority? If it's the latter, then obviously we need to branch out. And I think we can make an argument that says that we're a better fraternity or sorority if we have diverse membership. Those different lenses are going to help us make better decisions, faster decisions as an organization, and we'll be able to further that mission of the organization much better with diverse membership. And so I think that is a really important discussion. And again, we're fighting the way that we're wired. Earlier, we talked about the fact that we as humans are wired to want to belong. We're also wired to be around other people that look like us. We find that somewhat appealing, just the way that we're wired. And perfect example is, why are your kids coming out looking like you? The kids are coming out looking like you so that way you accept them, right? You want to be around them. That's just the way we're wired. We can fight that all day long, but that's how we're wired. And so the question is, if we are wired to recruit people that also look like us and are from the same hometown and dress like us and all the same things, then how do we fight that? How do we go against that, knowing that we'll have a better organization if we reach out to people who are from different places? So fascinating conversation again. I mean, we can go down this rabbit hole and we can talk about this for hours. Is there any part of the recruitment experience that you think all chapters should be reevaluating?
Yeah, I think all chapters should be reevaluating, like, why do we recruit in the first place? Do we recruit? Oh, and with that, quality, quantity. I know that for some organizations, we need to have pledge classes that are, 30 to 50. For others, it's like we need to be able to sustain who we have, and it could mean 3 to 5. Either way, we need to have a conversation about what it is that we're looking for,
Mhm.
and here's what we need to do in order to get there. When I think about it from, let's say, an admissions lens, admissions offices throughout the nation all have like a goal that they've set for themselves. But in order to get to that goal, they have to say, we need to offer X amount of admissions in order to get the amount of people to deposit. Well, in order to get the X amount of admissions, we have to have so many people in the funnel. In order to get the people in the funnel, we have to go out and figure out the markets in which we are recruiting in, to have that number, to then figure out the number of apps that we have, to figure out the number of admits that we have, to then figure out how many people are actually going to enroll. So when we think about it from that sort of strategy, we have to figure out, like, all right, if we need 200 people to show interest in this organization and we have 50 members, all right, now we have a strategy. Maybe each member needs to talk to 4 people. And I'm really over reducing this, but to give it just some context, like, we have to talk to X amount of people, which will then get us that number in the funnel and then be able to then work our way down, versus some of the smaller organizations who say we need 3 to 5 quality members. And those 3 to 5 quality members may or may not be from the initial recruitment bank that we've always recruited from. Maybe we need to think more broadly about who it is that we're looking at. And so here's a criteria, and that person may not look like, visibly like the people who are currently in the organization. Is that a bad thing? No. Sorry, I don't mean to answer for people, but that might be a no. And if it's no, then think of how now large of a pool you can draw from when you think it more broadly about who it is that you're looking for.
Good stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. We need to come to an agreement in terms of how many people we want to recruit, let's say this fall in 2025, and that needs to be a chapter discussion. And then we can back into how big of a funnel we need. So if we agree that in our chapter of our fraternity that we want to have 20 new members in the fall, I'm throwing out a random number, then that means that in the funnel, we probably need about 200 guys in the funnel. And then we're going to take the best 10% because there are going to be people that are going to drop out of our funnel for various reasons. So
Right.
then we can start to get into that frame of mind that says, okay, we need 200 people in the funnel. That means that, each one of us needs to be talking to X number of people in order to build a funnel of that size. But all of that starts with planning. And I think that we can have both. I think we can have quality and we can have quantity. I think we can have both. But the funnel has to be big enough in order to accommodate that. And then you can take the most amount of people and take the best. So I don't think that's exclusive. I think we can do both of those things. And the other thing too, I will say is that a lot of times whenever we didn't hit our recruitment goal, we would say stuff like, well, we took the best guys on campus. And when I hear that, then to me, that sounds like an excuse. I know that hurts for people to hear. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. I get that that hurts, but that just means that you didn't execute your goal, right? We just started this conversation by saying we're going to identify what the goal is before recruitment even starts and then evaluate at the end, did we hit our goal? And when we start to say stuff like, well, we got the best guys on campus, again, to me, that just sounds like an excuse that you're making yourself feel better for not executing the way that you wanted to execute, the way that we had discussed from the very beginning. And so I really want people to think about that. I think that's an important thing. And also start thinking about how many people are graduating, how many people are leaving your chapter this year, because you got to replace them in order to keep your size up, right?
Right.
So all of these conversations are incredibly important. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about too is because you have all of this like, HR background. What are some practical ways that chapters can improve this candidate experience for the potential new members, just the same way that HR tries to do that in the corporate world?
Sure. Yeah. So, candidate experience is it makes or breaks. It makes or breaks someone's. I won't have to reuse the word experience, but I'm thinking about you want this person to not only join the organization, but you want them to speak well of the organization and be able to be a recruiter on their own. Like I joined the organization because of X. I was able to get, my expectation was met, and now I'm saying to you, I would love for you to join the organization as well because I think you could get what I got and possibly more from the organization. But that is intentional, and that has to be on the minds of not only the individuals that bring in, but everybody who's part of the organization. We need to be able to say, when people join our organization, they're getting, and then whatever the two or three pillars are. And we are reinforcing that each time we have an event, each time we are getting together for chapter meeting, each time we are, doing socials, whatever it is, we are reinforcing that so that there's not a break in the communication chain so that some people are getting that experience and others are not. And then when you go out and talk, it's like, hey, Mike, you're part of Sigma Pi, right? Yeah. Like I've been thinking about, looking at an organization. Why should I join Sigma Pi? And you should be able to rattle off. Here are the reasons why I'm able, why you should join. And you do it in a way that feels authentic and real. And because I trust you, and I hear what you're saying, because I trust you, I hear what you're saying. And now, as I'm looking and I'm trying to discern, through all the different, options out there, I'm like, I'm really resonating with Mike and I'm really resonating with what he said. And that really fits my value set and everything aligns. And so then it's like, why would I make another choice when everything aligns and I could, be a part of this? So people need to realize that everything is interrelated. All of that part, everything, the ways in which we put our information out, our reputation on our campus, the ways in which our members represent us, both informal settings and informal settings. Like all of that is part of the recruitment and retention process. I can't talk one without talking the other. But people need to start thinking about that as, maybe chapter numbers are starting to dwindle or people are feeling some type of way about the organization. Like you have to sit back and think, how is it that we are doing this and how are we reinforcing the ideas that we want to get across? And if we are not doing that, then we need to have a really honest conversation about what is preventing us from doing that and how we can make the change in order to move in a positive direction.
This discussion is just so fascinating to me. I have one last question here. How can recruitment practices impact a chapter's culture long term?
Well, culture change is tough. I've seen organizations who've had, you know, you've talked about this, I think on, some other spaces, you wrote a book about it, talk about it from a hazing standpoint.
Yeah.
And, when chapters get suspended, for whatever reason, particularly, let's say hazing, you have to essentially reinvent yourself when you actually have the ability to come back, if you have the ability to come back. And so when you have the ability to come back, you then say, oh, here's an opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves. And the reputation that we had that preceded us, we're trying to break free of that. So here's how we're going to do that. You have to have individuals who have the ability to think in a very strategic and visionary way. And you have to have individuals who are also a part of that process so that they can feel like I see what you're trying to do. I want to work towards that as well. And in order for us to be successful, we all have to be on the same page. It can't be like, oh, well, those three or four who are in leadership, they feel that way. We're still going to do our own thing. See, but that's not going to be a recipe for success because then you're just going to have the schism. So you got to have people who are willing to commit to the longer term. And again, you think about it from our organizations. Organizations have strategic plans. Organizations have mission statements and vision statements, and they talk about change culture or change management and how do we do that. Like all of those pieces are all related, and I think people who are studying business may be able to see that faster than some of the others. But if you have individuals who have gone through that, advisors who say, I've done that, I'm doing that in my organization right now, and here are some of the principles we can apply to your organization. All right, cool. Well, let's take that a small piece at a time. And so I think practical ways are just that. Like you're understanding the tide, like everything that you're experiencing here, you're probably going to experience in your life moving forward. So here are the learning lessons that we can sort of take at a small point and then sort of move that forward.
Yeah, I talk about that culture change pretty often especially with fraternity chapters that are, they have hazing behaviors in their organization and try to figure out what is the new way forward and how do we change that. And it's not easy. You're getting that culture from alumni who have a lot of power often over the undergraduates. You have other chapters on campus that also might be hazing. So that's the least common denominator on that campus. And it's real easy and expected to copy that rather than to stand out for your values. So it's just a fascinating discussion. Again, I mean, each one of these ideas could be its own podcast, and we can go for miles on it. My weakness is really good food. I like to eat, and I just came back from speaking at the University of Chicago, and I tell you what, I had some excellent deep dish pizza at Pequod's. It was fantastic. I mean, it was just incredible. So the next time I happen to find myself in Chicago, where should I be going for a great meal?
Oh, wow, Chicago. All right. So interestingly enough, I live in Chicagoland.
Uh-huh.
And so I rarely get to Chicago proper.
Okay.
Um, but if I do go to Chicago proper, there are some places on the south side that sell soul food that are definitely um, like the Bee's Knees, Bronzeville area, lovely, lovely places to eat there. There was a place that I ate at. Barry's. Oh, what is the name of that place? Sorry, I wasn't thinking about this beforehand.
You're good.
It was a breakfast place. I'm talking about the line was out the door
Uh-huh.
for this
Uh-huh.
breakfast place. Barry's and something. It was on the northern side of the city, and I'll tell you, I had uh, no expectations except for the fact that this clearly is a place if you have to wait an extended period of time. The place itself was not that big, but yes, it was a lovely spot. Got some great breakfast food. The ambiance was wonderful. The service was top notch. So yes, if I remember the place, I might tag it.
I
You know,
think it's
like
called Batter and Berries.
batter and berries. Yes, and
Yes,
there are a
it's in
couple
Olympia
locations.
Fields. Yep.
Yes.
I know the spot. All right. Yeah, it is good. I highly recommend go and check it out. It is just as good as Michael is describing it. So if our listeners, if they want to connect with you for speaking opportunities on their campus around recruitment and belonging, where should they go to connect with you?
Sure. So in 2020, near the height of the pandemic, I thought, I was still working at a college at that point in time. I wanted to dabble in the world of consulting. So I created my own consulting group named after my two children, Quincy and Michael. So Quincy Michael Consulting Group. You can find us at quincymichael.com, QUINCYMICHAEL.com, and then fill out one of the request forms to say, hey, I'm interested in, one of the two programs that we mentioned here today.
Fantastic. QuincyMichael.com. Go and check it out. Michael Dixon, I tell you what, we've had some fascinating conversations, and every time we get together and we talk, I enjoy it. I learn something new, and I have new ideas for the future. And that's exactly the type of people that you want to surround yourself with. So thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for putting your voice into this space. We appreciate you, and thanks so much.
No, I appreciate it. I had a great time. Thank you.
All right, very nice. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation with Michael Dixon, I want you to like it and I want you to share it with every college student you know. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.